for you this lesson from Unity of the Keys Spiritual Center.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for having me today. It is really good to see your faces and to be able to come home despite being miles and miles away. I looked it up and I'm just, I don't know, a few miles short of 10,000 miles away from Key West right now. So it's wonderful to be with you. So today's talk is going to be, it's titled The Quiet Yes, and it's about listening without urgency. We're going to reflect on discernment and rhythm and inner knowing. And as you're listening to the talk today, um, I would invite you, you're very, very welcome to speak aloud or whisper or move your lips. So just to let the words land for you internally, because a lot of times we're in our heads and we're moving about life and we don't necessarily catch it in our body. So somatically, it helps us to not just hear it intellectually, but to allow our bodies to understand what we're integrating as well. So whatever feels natural, and if it doesn't feel natural, there's no have tos whatsoever. So over the last 2 weeks, Reverend Debris has caught me up on the meaningful arc that we've been on together as a community. So first we explored the Pearl of Great Price, and that's the idea that there's something essential, something deeply valuable already present in our lives once we recognize it. It's to be able to identify what that pearl is, right? And then last week, we reflected on the rhythm of your life, those patterns, the pace, and the way the days and the seasons move with us, sometimes often without noticing. So today feels like the next gentle step because once we know what matters, once we notice our rhythm, then the question is, how do we know what to say yes to without forcing clarity? So, many of us are taught either implicitly or explicitly that clarity comes from effort. That if we think harder, if we pray harder, if we work harder, if we play harder, analyze longer, that something will finally click. So I don't know, that resonates with me. So I thought I'd share this with you, and that it's often what we call confusion isn't a lack of guidance, but it's simply too much noise around us, within us, right? And especially, think of the times that we live in. There's a lot of noise out there. So if this feels true for you, you might nod or whisper yes, or just notice. Notice what your body does as you hear this. And what if clarity doesn't come from pushing forward, but from listening inward? And when guidance feels distant, there are seasons when guidance feels just so far away, not because it's missing, but because we're moving too fast to hear it. I'm going to go back to the noise that is existent in our society today. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff happening, a lot of noise, a lot of movement. And what's important to remember, and there's a phrase there at the bottom of that slide, is that spirit doesn't compete with urgency. It doesn't raise its voice over pressure. And so, for many of us, the most loving thing that we can do is to stop demanding answers before we're ready to receive them. And that's not simply in our interactions relationally with each other, but really to stop demanding answers from ourselves, to stop pressuring ourselves before we're ready to receive them. And so if you've ever felt rushed to decide something before you felt settled and grounded, and that you know that you know that you know, well, my friends, you're not alone. So if you've ever felt that, you might quietly say, yep, been there. That's me. That's me. So today I wanted to draw from the scriptures, right? It's 1 Kings 19. And so, and I want to anchor this in a familiar passage shared lightly with wisdom rather than doctrine. And so in 1 Kings 19, the prophet Elijah is overwhelmed and searching for guidance. And there's a great wind, powerful enough to break rocks. And then there was an earthquake and then a fire. So this passage tells us that God is not in any of those things. And after all of that came what's often translated as the still small voice. And so I'm going to pause right here, and I have some notes here I want to share with you because I want to share with you the metaphysical meaning of this passage because it's fascinating. So give me a second here while I pull it up. Okay. So in this passage, Elijah is exhausted, overwhelmed, and spent. So now this is the metaphysical interpretation. So think about a time when you felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and spent, and then listen to this story. So what follows is not a revelation of power, but a re-education of listening. So first comes the wind, strong enough to break rocks, then an earthquake, and then the fire. So each represents force, maybe mental urgency, maybe emotional upheaval, or maybe catalytic intensity. Like, oh my goodness, it's fire. So these are the states that we're conditioned to trust because they announce themselves, right? I mean, think about it: fire, earthquake, and wind. The weather, it's always the weather. So they feel important. And in a way they are, but the passage is clear that God was not in them. God is not in the earthquake or the fire or the wind. And only after the system has moved through, force does something else to arrive. And it's often translated as a still small voice. More accurately, the sound of the silence, right? Not instruction, not command, not running in circles, not ducking from the, running from the fire or saving yourself from the earthquake, but truly silence. In our term, you can say it's presence. It's being grounded in presence. So metaphysically, this is a teaching about authority, inner authority and inner agency. That guidance does not come through intensity or pressure or disruption. It comes through attunement, that the voice is quieter because it is, the voice is not quieter because it's weaker. It's quieter because it exists at a subtler field, the subtle field of energy. And that force cannot carry. So this isn't a story about God speaking. It really is a story about listening with maturity. With maturity. Okay. So historically, the story appears during this time of exhaustion and fear, right? And what's striking is this, that presence wasn't absent during the drama, but clarity came after the noise passed. So metaphysically, we might say truth doesn't arrive through intensity, that it arrives when we're settled enough to actually perceive it. So a moment of listening. So even when my mind was ready to say yes, I learned to pause until my body felt safe enough to agree. So see if that fits, what you've been through, that even though your mind was ready to say yes, you really had to wait until your body caught up, till it felt safe enough, right? So for this moment, just right here, take a moment here, and if you choose to, I invite you to bring to mind something that is present in your life right now. not something that is abstract, but something that's real, maybe a decision you get to make or a conversation that you've had recently, a next step that you've been circling. And then notice without judgment. What does your body say before your mind does? And you don't have to answer, just notice. Notice what your body is telling you. And so, how the quiet yes feels. A true yes often isn't dramatic. It doesn't rush us, it doesn't shout, it doesn't require us to override ourselves. It's often a felt quality, like a sense of steadiness, a quiet clarity, a feeling of being able to breathe again. And some of us may call it, oh, it resonates. You know, it lands for us. And we know this, right? This is not new information, but alas, we are all human. And that's why we're together in spiritual community to practice and remind each other in safe space that, you know, to take a breath, let the body arrive and let it settle, right? And let that yes be gentle. So here's a gentle question that you might carry this week when you're making, you know, choices and decisions, or you need clarity or whatnot. So here's the question. You may choose to write it down or not. The question is, does this choice, whatever that choice is, does this choice bring quiet afterward? Does this choice bring quiet afterward? Not excitement, not relief alone, but quiet, stillness. And so this one is for us together, a collective listening, because this process, this quiet yes, right, this allowing it to land, it isn't just personal, it's collective. Um, our community has its own rhythm, our community with our friends, maybe with our partner, with our family, our spiritual community, unity of the keys. It has its own rhythm, a shared nervous system in a way. We don't need to force our future because we can listen. We can listen for what creates coherence rather than urgency. And when we do, the way forward often becomes simpler than we expect. And so, if you're open to that, you might softly say or mouth, either aloud or to yourself, I'm listening. I'm listening, Spirit. Okay. So, here are some affirmations, and I invite you to say this with me in whatever way works with you. I typically like to say the first line and then I say together. And those of us who are in the sanctuary, we can say it together. And those of us who are at home, you can read it twice with me, right? Okay. So I trust the quiet wisdom within me. Together, I trust the quiet wisdom within me. This time, take a breath in. Exhale. I release urgency and listen deeply. Together, I release urgency and listen deeply. Right action unfolds in its own time. Together, right action unfolds in its own time. And so it is. Amen. Okay. So, friends, thank you again so much for having me here today. And as always, I love coming home to Unity. If something in today's reflection resonated, I do have a few resources. It's on the slide. You're welcome to explore. I've always known that part of my calling is to meet people where they are, often in a more secular space, and gently invite them back toward a grounded, compassionate spirituality. So actually, this talk was inspired by a recent course that I taught on Insight Timer called The Quiet Year. And you're very, very welcome to join me there or whatever feels right for you. Thank you for listening so generously today.